Yes. So the presentation that I'm making now is a byproduct of workshop that's going to take place in Seoul on 16th of December. I'm actually recording this before the workshop as a part of preparation to communicate with other participants. But then I gathered that this recording may be interesting to some of you. I don't know, because that may contain some information that is not easily accessible outside Japan unless you read Japanese and or using DeepL translation and other. Well, but even that, I think it is not easy to find this kind of information because too much detail. So yeah, then I explain only 4 cases. 3 cases are abuse of supervising position. Then the other relates to different regulation, but that too only to explain the abuse of supervising position. That is a theme at the workshop. Korea and Japan, of course, are 2 jurisdictions that have this kind of regulation. So for us, for Japanese scholars, ASBP, how strange it may feel, it's a part of our life. So we cannot think of the life without ASBP. So it's there. So we sometimes discuss this whether no, this is a good idea, good thing, good regulation to have to begin with, but you know, more often we are more about details and how to make this better regulation or kind of rules that works in line with consumers' interest and better society and consumer welfare and also innovation, but also equality, all this, making this rule towards the, okay. And then, but what I wanted to say is that it's only about 4 cases. So information is limited, but very detailed. Then the last caveat is that the, although you'll see the 4 authors' name, no, the 3 authors' name, including myself, but and also Professor Shibata and Professor Wakabayashi. And in the process of creating all this set of slides, we discussed and communicated and exchanged our views. And so, but what I say, particularly orally, may include my own personal view, which differs from ones of Professor Shibata's and Professor Wakabayashi. And I may say something wrong as well. I'm sorry for that in advance. So these are the caveat. And the rest is the presentation starts after this. So I hope that you enjoy my presentation somehow. Thank you for your time. Okay, right, and then right. Let me start. So our plan is to explain, present 4 concrete cases, but let me first briefly explain how the abuse of supervisory position is regulated in Japan. The AMA defines ASBP under Article 2, Paragraph 9, Item 5. Although its subsection C contains a broad term, here on the last part, establishing or changing trading terms and executing transaction in a way disadvantageous to the counterparty, which would cover every types of the abusive practices, the JFTC tends not to use this general term and instead uses the more concrete and specific practices listed elsewhere, namely A, forced purchase, B, requirement of money and or service, C, refusal to accept goods, return of goods, delayed payments, or reduction of prices. And the chart here is an illustration of the JFTC practice. It's only the alerts issued in fiscal year 2021, and then I'm sorry for it's only written only in Japanese and with the Chinese characters, but important part is here. You see that's A, B, 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 C, 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 C. So these are specific practices listed in on the article 295 as we have seen. So although the JFTC may additionally issue alerts to request reduce and other unilateral changes to contractual terms and other practices, such cases are limited. Then compared to particularly Korea, the penalty is minor, where the JFTC finds violation and issues an order. The JFTC is obliged to order the payment of the administrative fine called surcharge, but amount is only 1% of affected turnover. Then private litigation is rare to begin with, and at the best, only single damage is awarded. Then no criminal liability is imposed. Furthermore, nowadays, the JFTC tends to use commitment procedure and other informal measures such as warnings and alerts. Then, as you may know, the Subcontract Act supplements the AMA ASBP regulation, which is extensively used by the JFTC. In contrast, the specific designation established to address the large retailers, ASBP, is no longer used as a penalty for this. It's only cease and desist order without fine. So since in the past, here now the JFTC imposes the fine, but before in the past that's not the case. But since the introduction of the this in 2017, I think, I have to check, 19. The JFTC stopped using this specific designation, then instead applies the AMA provision to impose a fine that comes with a fine. Right, then let's start. Our first case is sorry. Another point that may be worth noting is that the JFTC is no longer an agency entrusted to protect general consumers. Since establishment of the Consumer Affairs Agency, it is this agency which deals with issues relating to consumer protection, including misleading conduct against general consumers. The same hold for the Personal Information Protection Commission. There are someone maybe who are interested in the JFTC's ASBP guidelines relating to personal data. And as a scholar, that was about general consumers protection. Then as a scholar, I welcome such a move by the JFTC because by them, in the past, the ASBP was only about business-to-business transaction, not the business-to-consumer transaction. But I haven't seen substantial involvement of the JFTC in that area yet. Namely, that ASBP in the circumstances or in terms of transaction B2C relationship. Right, then let's start at last. And our first case, Lars, relates to a large retailer abusing its position against the supplier. Lars was ranked third in the Hokkaido area and made dozens of suppliers to dispatch employees, pay money, and buy stuff. These are essential practices that JFTC has been regulating for a long time as abuse ASBPs. Then the JFTC issued cease and desist order and ordered to pay fine. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So, and it has been since 2009 since the JFTC started issuing fine. Yeah, it's confusing because I'm thinking about when it comes to the amendment, the year of the amendment or enactment, or the enactment, in Japan it's called with the imperial year, while here we're using that, obviously, that Western way to say it. So I was confused. I'm sorry. Right, and let me continue. Then so orders to pay for fine. Then Laos appealed, in the end, and all up to the Supreme Court, which rejected a review of the case. So the Tokyo High Court judgment became final. Then here is an excerpt from Tokyo High Court ruling. Like the JFTC, the court noted that ASBP is unlawful in that it negates a counterparty's free and independent judgment and creates causes disadvantage and advantage. I suppose the second part is worth examining. So one of the theoretical challenges to ASBP regulation is how such a regulation relates to competition in the market. Then the second part is an answer to this question. As an illustration, this illustration shows those who abuse the position enjoy advantages relative to their competitors, while those who are abused suffer disadvantages relative to their rivals. Then, having said that, please note that the JFTC does not establish advantage and disadvantages in a concrete manner. In relation to the superior bargaining position, what is required in general is that the counterparty has to accept substantially disadvantageous terms and a request imposed upon by the large retailer for the fear of discontinuance of the trade by defendant. The JFTC and the courts take into account various factors, such as these listed in the slide. Then next slide, these rulings may be interesting. In particular, the second part, talking about a specific business, implying that you can think of significant, or you can assess disadvantages is significant or not in light of impact on a specific business rather than whole business that one particular supplier operates. So the specific business could be a type of products or kind of products that they supply, or some regional branch like Kyoto branch or Hokkaido branch. Then significant disadvantages could be found if that specific, like Hokkaido branch, is suffer disadvantage relative to their competitor in the Hokkaido region. So this is what it means. And then I think this is significant because such interpretation potentially allows the JFTC to find that, for example, the Japanese local supermarket, like Laos, who have super bargaining position relative to big multinationals such as Coca-Cola. Then it may be worth pointing out also that low dependency ratio in terms of share of sales is not decisive. The JFTC examines the difficulty of securing alternative trading partners, particularly using the list of questions such as this. Here, I tried to recreate the list of questions based on Tokyo High Court ruling in Laos, then you may have noted that superior bargaining position was found in relation to the supplier whose sales to Laos accounted for only 0.2%. This was called supplier 83. And these two slide number 16 and 17, show the reason that the Tokyo High Court agreed with the JFTC that Laos had such a position despite the low ratio. And speaking that it was difficult, impossible to find new retailers, and it was not easy to replace the business with the Laos with other retailers and such as this. Right. And then in assessing what then moving on, I think. Yeah, right. In assessing whether or not Laos had engaged in a listed practices, that the one that we've seen, Article 295 ABC, the court examined whether Laos had imposed disadvantages on suppliers. In line with JFTC view, the court particularly examined whether disadvantage could not be calculated in advance or exceed the burden which would have been seen reasonable. Then, having found such advantages were caused, the court continued to examine impediment or to fair trade, or examine a practice impeded fair trade in light of normal competition order, well, simply put, unfairness. So the last slide from Laos judgment is about unfairness. As already noted, the court understands that ASBP is unfair as bad as it impairs free and independent business judgments and distorts the competition. The findings are made in line with such an understanding where you can see that free and independent judgment and disadvantage or advantage. But additionally, the court noted that abuse was done against a large number of suppliers in a systematic manner. This reminds us of the JFTC's understanding of spreadness, or the fact that the practice is widely adopted. The JFTC has been of the view that impediment to fair competition, a requirement of ASBP, cannot be found without the fact that practice at issue widely affects trade or has the possibility of affecting it, either through its own wide coverage or through others' adoption of similar abusive practices. Right. Then, so far it has been about Laos. Then by now, you may have started wondering that the superior bargaining position may be found in every circumstance. And in fact, that's not the case. The Edion case is illustrative, in which the JFTC concluded that superior bargaining position did not exist in relation to 35 suppliers that are highlighted in the chart. Here it says Annex 5, and this is Annex 5, and I'm sorry, these are only written only in Japanese, but basically what's written here is the questions that we, like the one that we saw in Laos. Then here the JFTC is asking, like, is it necessary to continue the trade with this particular large retailer, in this case, Edion? Then is it difficult to find alternative or the other retailers on the other more concrete or specific fact, or whether they are supplying some private labels, or is there any negotiation between you and Laos, Edion? So yeah, so I think this kind of reasoning the this may indicate the importance of the list of questions and answers to it, and also the following fact-finding practices that GFTC carries out. And maybe also remarkable that GFTC is finding the several value, well, confirming or checking the several value position in relation to each supplier at such a meticulous manner. Then both, so we've seen Larus and part of Edion. So these two are important cases as they are among the 5 remarkable cases in which the administrative fine was imposed. As I said earlier, yeah, the JFTC in the past had no authority to impose fines. Then all 5 these decisions were appealed and prompted the JFTC and the courts to clarify the rules and the standards in relation to the ASBP. And then notably, all these 5 cases involved in large retailers. But it is only by accident because the JFTC's ASBP case records include a various relationship, including bank and borrowers, hotel and suppliers, franchisor and franchisees, and platform sellers. Then second case is Amazon ASBP case but commitment case. So there is no appeal because it's commitment decision. Then in this case, we don't see much. We don't know much about this case because there is no appeal and the information published by the JFTC is limited. But at least we know this. In this case, Amazon bought products to sell on its platform. And for your information, Amazon is ranked first or second amongst all online retailers of the general products in Japan. Then the abusive practices that Amazon engaged in are shown in the slide. Amazon reduced the price and required its supplier to pay money to Amazon. Then in essence, this case may look like the other familiar ASBP cases, including Larus. Then, however, a closer look reveals that Amazon case is different from Larus, maybe, or kind of unique. Not, not, not necessarily this is the only case, but some difference. As noted earlier, the ASBP typically relates to forced purchase, requirement of the service, money, delayed payment, and other practices that effectively make changes to what was first agreed between the abusing party and those who are abused. So simply put, retrospective changes effectively. And in contrast, Amazon's practice was based on contracts, inventory and compensation contracts and joint marketing program agreements. So these are not entirely retrospective changes in the sense that the counterparty could have known what to expect at the time of entering into the contract. So in this regard, maybe I should clarify one point. I personally tend to explain that the typical SBP case in Japan involves retrospective changes because it's easier and I understood more easily outside Japan. But the JFTC and the court use, in fact, different concept. It's the disadvantage that cannot be calculated in advance. So I think there is a difference between retrospective change and disadvantage that cannot be calculated in advance, or like imposing a disadvantage on the counterparty which the counterparty cannot calculate in advance. So this disadvantage or the burden could be actually, in a way, agreed in an abstract manner or vaguely without specifying how much or to what extent. But still, the JFTC can find that it is a disadvantage. Well, so in that sense that there is no change, it's in compliance with the contractual terms, but the term is vague or abstract. Then, and then after the um, after entering into the contract, then one party, stronger party, started saying that you have to pay this, and it's disadvantageous, but it's the written in a contract. But in that situation, one would say that there is no retrospective change to the contract, but still you can say that it is a disadvantage that on the counterpart, which the counterpart cannot calculate in advance. So under this with this concept, the vague contract terms under which such advantages occurs may be seen as unfair or ASBP more easy or more readily. The next point, the JFTC in this case opted for commitment procedure for this and ordered the commitment included the recovery of damage to the supplier. And it is the first time in a JFTC ASBP cases, although such recovery is a normal remedy under the Subcontract Act, but the remedy taken under the Subcontract Act is voluntary in nature. So in a way, the JFTC has never ordered to recover damage to the aggrieved party. So that's another interesting point or the aspect of the ASBP regulation in Japan. But moving on the next point, I'm trying to be descriptive in this because that was the purpose there. Then we are going to have dialogue and analyze and then discuss with the other attendees at the workshop. With you, with the audience there, someone who are listening only to this presentation, we cannot, unfortunately, we cannot have dialogue immediately after my presentation, but although I, of course, welcome any kind of discussion anytime. And then moving on, then Amazon ASBP case is one of the 3 JFTC cases in which the ASBP was found in relation to digital platforms. So let me repeat, or let me show this. So these are the list, the JFTC's case list that involves in that relates to digital platforms. Then you see this ASBP cases, 3 of them, 2 are Amazon and another is Rakuten, IT big company in Japan. But the rest, the JFT does not use the ASBP. They are single firms conduct. As you can see, you can see only one company, one platform here. So it's single firms conduct, but it's dealt by under different set of rules, particularly GD paragraph 12. I will explain later what the general designation is, but you see this paragraph 12 is here, there. So it's very often used. And also what you can see is that the MFN, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 cases are about MFN. So most MFN, most favored nation clause or parity clauses. And they are not regarded as a ASBP in Japan. So I think talking about the MFN cases could be a good explanation that how the JTC uses the ASBP and other regulations. So right. So MFN is regarded as a GD paragraph 12 violation. Then GD paragraph 12 means this. It's called trading on district terms, one of the unfair trade practices, which is prohibited by Article 19 of AMA. Unfair trade practices here, like UTP in Japan, is different from the UTP in Europe. UTP in Europe, it tends to be more about pure unfair trading practices, misleading or coercion or but in Japan, at least so far, the UTP is the Anti-Monopoly Act AMA concept, competition law concept, the category of practices that prohibited by Article 19. Then there are two types of the UTPs. One type of the UTP is listed on AMA itself. Then another type of the UTPs are designated by the JFTC, and this paragraph 12 is one of them. It's called general designation. General designation means that designated by the JFTC by the other unfair trade practices. Then on the abuse regulation, the ASBP regulation and the GD paragraph 12 deal with different problems. While the ASBP is about free and independent judgments, the GD paragraph 12 is about anti-competitive effects in terms of foreclosure or the restriction of interbrand or intrabrand competition leading to the maintenance of high price. Then please note that here we deal with more immediate or clear or obvious anti-competitive effect, not merely distorting competition by giving advantage and disadvantages. It's more in line with there's some theories of harm that would be discussed or covered by the U.S. antitrust law. Then, so they are different. So let's move on. I may touch upon this point, may go back to that point at some point, but let's move on to the real case, onto the concrete case. One of the recent JFTC MFN cases was Booking.com, under which the JFTC saw the wide parity clause or wide MFN relating to price and capacity as problematic. Then in general, the MFN may soften competition among platforms and may have an exclusionary effect by inhibiting rival platforms from making their services more attractive. The JFTC noted that the price parity clauses at issue indeed made it difficult for other online travel agencies to have more attractive pricing, even though the platform was ready to reduce its commission fee. Then Booking.com offered certain commitments, and the JFTC accepted that they were sufficient to address the competitive concerns. Then notably, the JFTC clarified that it is not the position of the JFTC is to see only wide price parity was as an issue. Then more importantly, in this context of this presentation, with regard to the MFN or parity clauses, one may argue that it is unfair that as it impairs a hotel's freedom to set its price freely, one may say that MFN is a practice that may constitute an ASBP. However, I may be wrong, but to my knowledge, the JFTC has never made such a statement, or at least we haven't seen such case here. MFN is not categorized as ASBP. There is no association with between, there is no link between MFN and ASBP here. Then I rarely encounter law scholars arguing that MFN by itself is an ASBP either. Of course, there are many number of competition law scholars in Japan, so who have a variety of views. Thus, I have to be careful not to overgeneralize them. But nevertheless, it has been an impression. Well, in general, it has been my impression that the modern active MS scholars in Japan first try to identify theory of harms which may result in exclusion or collusion or some other way to restrict interbrand or interbrand competition, which could lead to establishment or maintenance of market power. Then for the UTPs, market power is not necessary. When the market power is established or maintained or enhanced, it is found that private monopolization regulation has been violated. This deals with more serious harms, and then reflecting that the penalty is more severe, the administrative fine and 10% or 60%, and in theory, criminal penalties is also possible. Then all the UTPs, including ASBP, in general, the penalty is minor because it's more like because it deals with minor harm, less than market power in general. So it's like precautional approaches or to prevent such serious harm. JFTC steps in earlier, then stop that practice, but it's only to prevent the serious harm, so there is no criminal liability on this. And surcharge or administrative fine may be imposed only when it's repeated. ASBP is actually the exception because surcharge fine is imposed from the first violation, but still it's only 1%, so it's still lower than this. So it's kind of preventative one's regulation. Then so because this deals with a more serious harm, so what the JFTC and scholars have in our mind is that the theory, we think of the theory of harm that could result in this. Then if the impact is minor, then it ends up with UTPs. I think this is a typical way of thinking or analyzing practices in Japan. Then in that, ASBP is different because ASBP does not have such clear theory of harm. It doesn't about exclusion. It doesn't about the restricting interbrand competition. It doesn't about collusion. It's only about the disadvantages. At the best, it causes the disadvantages and advantages, but it's not confirmed or assessed in a concrete manner. So in that's where that ASBP differs from the rest of the AMA and competition law regulation in Japan. And then moving back to this point. Okay, then for the GD general designation paragraph 12, it is necessary to assess. Well, typically or conventionally assess such a theory of harm, typically, and could be minor, but still some anti-competitive effect has got to be found to find the GD paragraph 12 violation. Then MFN has this theory of harm, either exclusion or software competition, so GD paragraph 12 is thought better suited as this addresses minor but more immediate anti-competitive effect, not unlike the ASBP. Then the question could be that what if the such a anti-competitive effect is absent? Then my question, I believe many scholars' question, I hope that JFTC question, my answer, and I believe that others answers as well. Hopefully the JFTC answer. Well, in that case, there is no violation, period. Then because there is no necessary anti-competitive effect under the GD paragraph 12. So there's no violation. Thus then one may say that what about finding violation, calling it as an ASBP? Then my personal answer, then I hope that others would answer in the same manner as well. About this, I'm not sure, and I myself may be wondering whether this is a good answer. But let me now. For now, I think this is the answer. This is not the cause of the answer. Finding using the ASBP when there's no when the GD paragraph 12 cannot be used. That's not the course that the JFTC takes generally, to my knowledge. So yeah, so that's the way that, at least so far, the JFTC, the way decisional practices. If I have more time and the presentation can be longer, I may explain some other instances where in fact, the JFTC is criticized that instead of this, they in terms of selection of the provision or way to use the provision and the AMA rules, but I don't have the time for this. So, but in relation to the relationship between the ASBP and the DEST, I think that's the in generally, in most cases, this is the case, I think. Then another thing that I would like to point out, is that there's no escalation of the ASBP. Like if the abuse is done by someone who has only super bargaining position, then the ASBP, or in the other context, other situation, and of which they have dominant position, the abuse of dominant position is result in a more severe fine or like criminal liability. There is no possibility in Japan there, because Japan doesn't have the abuse of dominant position regulation. The single firm's conduct, single firm's practice is regulated both as UTPs and also private monopolization. So the closest one, the closest to the regulation on abuse of dominant position would be this, private monopolization. But private monopolization is different from the abuse of dominant position. Like the US Sherman Act Section 2 differs from the your EU Article 2, 102 violation, because in Japan, private monopolization requires the exclusionary conduct or controlling conduct that result in establishing or maintaining market power or substantial restraint on competition. So it's not like there's a dominant position, the company that have the dominant position, then abuse either exclusion or imposing unfair terms or exploitative abuse, then there's a violation. That's not the case in Japan. So ASBP is unique in Japanese competition law. This regime, that's GD paragraph 12. It's the difference between the UTPs, such as the GD paragraph 12 and the private monopolization is the matter of degree. The nature is very similar. Both deals with anti-competitive effect, but ASBP is different. And as a result, when you see that some unfair or abusive or some practices that doesn't have the anti-competitive outcome in the sense of in terms of exclusion and collusion, then the worst result outcome you will get is death, like 1% surcharge payment on the private damage or an injunction, although they are rare. Right. The last case is Tabelogu, which is a significant civil platform related cases. This is civil litigation. This case is also remarkable because it deals with the ranking or digital platform for the first time in the AMA history, in a concrete case. The Tabelogu is a restaurant review and reservation portal or platform, which is widely used in Japan. Then given the Tabelogu's popularity, the ranking and points on the scores received by Tabelogu matters to the restaurant. Then the plaintiff in this case was one of such restaurants whose ranking was lowered by Tabelogu when it changed ranking algorithm. Then the restaurant sued Tabelogu for injunction and damages. Civil injunction is possible under Article 24 of the AMA, wherein the court has to find if the plaintiff has suffered or not, or is likely to suffer substantial damage. Here, sorry. Then the court accepted that Tabelogu had a superior bargaining position for all these reasons. Then it caused disadvantages unfairly. Again, the disadvantage that cannot be calculated in advance. But then the court did not find substantial damage and rejected to issue an injunction. However, the court ordered Tabelogu to pay damage. Yeah, it's already interesting case for us. Then, although this was a civil case, the JCC was involved in the case and issued an advisory opinion. Then, under Article 17(9) of the AMA, the court assessing the injunction relief application is entitled to ask the JFTC for an advisory opinion. This was used in Tabelogu, and the JFTC sent an advisory opinion. Then it is in most cases, it's the JFTC that enforces the AMA. And so it is interesting for us and important to know that how the JFTC sees this case. And then another thing, another background is that the JFTC also had conducted a survey in 2020 and clarified its view on various competitive issues relating to restaurant reviews platforms. And in this report, the JFTC mentioned that the changes to ranking algorithm may constitute an ASBP. Then given that Tabelog's practice was not exactly the same as the practice mentioned in the JFTC survey report, the Tokyo District Court specifically asked the JFTC to clarify its intention. So that was the background of this advisory opinion. Then in light of the JFTC's traditional decisional practices, Tabelog could have raised various interesting issues. For instance, in this case too, well, it could be tricky to argue that Tabelog had engaged in retrospective changes. Because by its nature, the ranking algorithm will change the way it ranks all the time. But then it's not the retrospective changes. It's about the disadvantage to the counterparty that cannot be calculated in advance. Then how we should use this concept in terms of the ranking algorithm or the platforms. So by nature, the ranking algorithm will change the way it ranks all the time. Then if we adopt the broad definition of disadvantage to the counterparty that cannot be calculated in advance, then most platforms with the review and search functions may be engaged in ASBP. Then one may argue that such a view may result in overregulation. Then others may argue that it is actually good policy, as it would effectively force the platform to be more transparent. Next point is that spreadness requirement could be another issue, or could have been another issue. Generally, I'm sorry, next point, next slide, right here, we are here now. Generally, this requirement may inhibit the private party to bring the ASBP case, as by definition, the plaintiff could be only party who was disadvantaged. But in Tabelog, it was not the issue, as the changes to Tabelog algorithm widely affected others as well. Then another issue was whether the platform needs to benefit by the practice. This is actually an important point. If you remember the first two cases, Laos and Amazon, and also the specific practices listed on MA Article 295, the defendants always benefited from the practice, like by getting money, by getting services, by reducing price that they have to pay. But in contrast, it is it is more difficult to think that the Tabelog had gained such financial gains or benefits by changing the algorithm. So that could be an important issue, matter or point when it comes to the platforms. Then the JFTC may have been of the view that such benefit are typically necessary to find an ASBP when it conducted survey in 2020, because in that report, such benefits existed in all the hypothetical examples of the ASBP noted in of the ASBP cases in the report, JFTC's survey report. Then, if that had been the case, if such benefit has got to be exist to find the SBP, and if the JFTC had taken such a position in the advisory opinion of Tabelog, it would have been created a substantial limit to the SBP regulation involving digital platforms. However, the JFTC did not do so, which probably helped the plaintiff win the case. So thank you very much for your attention and time. I conclude my presentation here. So lots of points, could be too many points to discuss. Then, as I said, I'll go to the Korea to have dialogues, and I'll gain different insights and new insights and new lessons, and yeah, then I may change my mind, or I may change perspective, and I may gain a lot of about. But anyhow, a discussion first. So we will discuss these cases in it. So, but to you, to someone who um, saw this video, I thank you. Thank you so much. And then I hope that you have enjoyed it somehow. Then I also hope that I can have the opportunity to discuss this with you in the future. Thank you very much.